Thank you. I just wanted to thank Anne for inviting me to speak today. So she's already given you my biographical information. This is about what I have learned as a lecturer teaching in my specific environment. So I'll walk you through that as I go through these. I was a painter and artist turned academic. Again, I've recently submitted a PhD in history and archives, and I teach critical and cultural studies. So I'm an artist turned academic, which means that I've spent most of my educational and teaching career working with creative people who prefer making things over traditional academic approaches, including my peers in graduate school. So, but I've always been sort of half creative, half academic. So convincing my students that skills of self-expression and sound critical thinking are vital to their educations has been part of my vocation because it's always stood me in good stead even when I was a creative practitioner. So this idea of inclusive teaching is at the core of what I do in my education in Dunleary because IDT students come from a very wide range of backgrounds and experiences. So all my module and assessment options from the minute they walk in the door are aimed at putting everyone on an equal footing. I want them to have useful skills and information no matter what they go on to do in their careers. So strategies for inclusive teaching have become part of my general practice. It's just how I think about things. And this whole idea of sort of difference, in my classroom, difference is normal. Difference is my normal. The creative brains that come to IDT have a wide range of experiences, a wide range of challenges and opportunities. So this notion of difference is factored into my teaching from the minute everybody walks in the door, especially in year one. And that takes place across a range of stuff. And specific learning difficulties are always navigated on a case-by-case basis in coordination with our very, very excellent writing and research skills office and our access office. They're vital to my work in this regard. We all work together. So that's a chart from the types of disability that were declared to us last year. So you can see we have lots and lots of dyslexia or other kind of specific difficulties in that way. We have mental health issues, we have medical physical issues, we have students who are on the autistic spectrum. We have a wide range of people who have declared with our access office. And last year, 10.6% of our students had some kind of declared disability, so we're above the national average, we're well above the national average. That chart doesn't include people who come in with English as a second language, which is getting more and more common. Students who are encountering severe economic difficulty, again, getting more and more common, and really, really impacting people. Mature students, we don't at Dunleary make a huge difference between mature students and CAO students. They just come in as part of the mix. And students with ongoing significant family issues. So we have lots and lots, there's lots of stuff going on in my classroom. So the typical CAO applicant who goes from second level straight into third level education typically makes up half or sometimes less than half of the faces in my classroom. So I try when I'm, the way that students reflect their knowledge always is through some kind of assessment. And to get them to an assessment, you give them a brief. So when I write a brief, I always try to allow space for students to show their range of learning. And what I emphasize, especially in all the way through, but starting in first year, analysis, reflection, synthesizing the research that we do in class, and individual and critical thinking. I don't worry so much about the mechanics in the early stages. Obviously that's important and obviously I need to tackle that, but it's not where we begin. So right from the start, my briefing papers are all designed to foster the necessary skills that for successfully completing the work up to level 8 honors degree through their fourth year thesis work. So the minute they walk in the door, I'm seeing them in their robes. They're going, oh my God, I have an essay due. So I'm thinking ahead for them. So I try to structure a brief that gives options for students to become aware of their strengths, because they have strengths they don't even know when they walk in the door. As Tim was saying, everyone comes in with some kind of skills that they take for granted because it's part of their lives. I try to get them to reflect that and incorporate that into their learning processes. So the assignments are also geared toward encouraging visual and spatial thinkers to develop their critical and expressive abilities, because most of the people I deal with are visual and spatial thinkers. And I try to get them to take the things that they know and then to develop articulate, modulated, thoughtful responses to a group of ideas and to develop their independent points of view. So the briefs are meant to do a few kinds of different things, and in accomplishing this goal, I try to allow options for everyone when I structure a brief. Because from my point of view, briefs should work for everyone. A briefing paper should work for everyone. So I don't really think about accommodation in that sense. I try to make sure that I know my room and that the brief works for all of them. And my assumption is that if it works for students, say, with dyslexia or some other SLD or some other kind of impairment, that it will work for everyone. So I try to offer them clear choices. I give them a sound structure to begin with, especially in the early parts of their education, the first 2 years. I help them by structuring the brief in a certain way. I ask them to focus on the ideas, and I ask them to learn about what constitutes appropriate research. So briefs are meant to build capability and confidence over time. I see this, they see the first essay when they walk in the door. I see a 4-year process every time I get a new group of students. So over time, I try to offer projects in various kinds of formats. And there are different modes that I've developed that I use regularly. So I design my briefs to allow for the demonstration of knowledge that engages multiple learning modalities. And again, the structures, we work on structures. If people have difficulty with reading, with the written word, with comprehension, we work on that as we go. But I want them to get to grips with their ideas because that's what's amazing about our students. So they learn to navigate multiple methods for showing what they know because knowledge in the knowledge environment, in the growing knowledge environment, and especially in a college of art, design, and technology, knowledge takes a lot of forms, and they need to, each form demands a different way of expressing knowledge. So I ask them to navigate as many of those as they can. Because different forms of reflecting knowledge requires a set of flexible approaches. And for our students particularly, working environments in the creative sectors mean that oftentimes you're working in a digital or an online format so that production companies might be on different continents. So a digital workflow pipeline might mean that you're communicating about really complex stuff with people that you never see, that you never meet. So, you know, that's a kind of typical 3D production pipeline, say for animation or for a 3D digital animation process where you have a pre-production phase where the story comes into being, everything gets designed, you send it out for production where you actually make the thing, and then you send it to post-production where it's composited and everything's corrected and polished up and put together. Those things can take place, say in France, Hungary, Ireland, California, all working on the same production. So they need to be able to express themselves from a distance, clearly. So I try, the briefs I have all that in mind when I'm designing the work that I give them. And I use universal design thinking in designing the work that I assign to my students. So every brief has a hierarchy of information. Every brief emphasizes analysis and research because that's what I want them to learn. They all encourage independent critical thinking. They grow skills over time. And I try, to the best of my ability, depending on who's in the room, to make them consistent and rational. I try to help the students understand what it is that I want them to learn. So I'm just going to show you a few. These are taken from one of my first year briefs. These are just the components. Obviously, these are all on the same page, but it's easier for you to see them, so I broke them up into bits. There's always a section on the assessment criteria and learning outcomes. I tell them exactly what I want them to do. So this is an image analysis essay that I will show you in a second. But I tell them I want 4 to 5 images that are appropriate to the assignment. I want them to have 3 references to readings. I want them to have X many footnotes. And then the next thing I want them to do is analysis and evaluation. I want them to use the concepts that we've talked about in class and the sources that I've had them read for lecture and put them into the format of their essay. And I always tell them when I'm introducing this, those 2 things are at the top for a reason. That's the stuff I'm looking at most closely. And we have a thing in our briefs in Dunleary called innovation. So I always talk about the idea that that's you learning to develop your independent point of view and your critical thinking skills. Competence is, in an essay, is a well-structured progression of ideas, and then at the, attention to design and readability. And the last thing I put on that list is spelling and grammar. If your ideas are good, we'll work on the spelling and grammar. It will come. Don't worry about it. The ideas are where it should be. And this notion of engagement, they have to be in class, they have to be doing the readings, they have to be talking to each other, talking to me, feeding back. And I should say I have the luxury of reasonably small groups of students that I teach for 4 years all the way through. So that makes a difference. I really get to know them, and they get to know me. Then I give them a sense of why we're doing this project, what it's about, and what exactly I'm asking them to do. And in this list, I've given them a list of ideas to remind them what we talked about in class. These are the things I want to see in your essay. So those are the things from lectures and readings that they should be reflecting back to me. So they get some notion of why we're doing it and what exactly they're supposed to be doing. And then I tell them, this has to have 1,700 words. All your images have to have labels. All references have to have a footnote. I tell them exactly what I want. I don't let them guess. And then on the due date is in a big block on the side, so they're not confused about when it's due, by what time, or where they're supposed to submit it to. And then, of course, they know me, but I put that there anyway. Okay, so when I'm writing an assessment brief, there are several things that are absolutely constant for me. First, inclusivity and clarity. It has to offer something to everyone. All the briefs should offer something to everyone. I'll make special accommodation if I need to, obviously, but a successful brief for me is something that everyone can access from the get-go. And because I have students who aren't confident in their academic abilities oftentimes and who aren't confident writers, I try to assign things to them where they kind of forget that they're writing. I give them an interesting intellectual problem and then they just write to solve it. But if I take away that scary word essay, they just do it. And then they kind of surprise themselves. My own reflective practice as a lecturer is key to this. I have to be flexible, I have to be aware. And my own learning in that regard is always growing along with the learning from my students. And then the consultation with my students about what works and what doesn't work. I'm lucky enough that we get on, we trust each other, and I don't necessarily even need to, when I ask them for feedback, I don't even have to do it anonymously. I go, what works? And they'll say, well, that bit there, that was crap, we hated that. But this bit worked really well for us. So my briefs have developed through consultation with my students, they always do. So I do some what are often referred to as alternate things. I just think of all these things as tools that I can use to get them to the knowledge that they need. So I do standard academic essays, I do reflective essays, I do what would be called the kind of standard formats. I do what I call a PowerPoint essay, where I let them reflect the information in a PowerPoint presentation. And then I ask them to do presentations, both group and individual. And those are all things that they're going to need in their careers. But I try to put a twist on them, because they come in as visual thinkers, as spatial thinkers. So I try to give them something concrete and familiar to hold on to while I'm asking them to try out these new skills of critical thinking and critical analysis. So I do, my first essay in first year is often what I call an image analysis essay. So ask them to choose 4 or 5 images. Only one can be a standard work of art, which is what they covered in the Leaving Cert, and I'm not looking for a Leaving Cert essay. I'm quite specific with them about that. So I try to get them to pick something: advertisements, film stills, comic panels, anything that interests them. And then it's kind of a sneaky way of me getting to find out who they are and what they're interested in as well. And then I ask them to analyze the images by analyzing an image through a series of things we've discussed in class, and then creating links from image to image. So we're kind of playing Chinese whispers with the images. So I get them to do stuff like this. They might choose an image like that, where they can talk about things like how the image is composed, what kind of cultural coding is in the image, how subject positions play out within an image. There's a man named Stuart Hall, who some of you probably know, we study him, his notion of constructionist representation. Is there an ideology throughout the entire image? And we look at the whole thing under the rubric of visual culture. So it allows them to combine word and image through reference to the course material. And it gives them something to hold on to while they're learning unfamiliar concepts. And I just put those up because it tends to work for everybody, this one. One of those students is dyslexic, one of them isn't. And you wouldn't be able to tell from their essays. Now, if you looked at them closely, there are a few spelling errors and a few structural things in the dyslexic student's essay, but the ideas are excellent in both of them. They've got broadly similar marks, and they're thinking in ways, they're learning in ways, they've accomplished the goal that I've set out for them. And I do a variation for this, of this on objects. So trying to get students to tackle, under the notion of material culture, trying to get students to tackle their assumptions about what objects are used for, why they're designed the way they are, how objects become markers of culture. And I ask a specific set of questions, and and I give them the material they need to answer those questions. So they always choose their own. We usually use a museum artifact. They always choose their own objects. And for my model making 3D design students, I give them another assignment that's a variation on that, where I ask them to analyze a prop in a film and talk about what role that prop plays in the narrative and how objects become part of narrative structure. So that's a puzzle box from the film Hellraiser, and there's a set from what's that movie? Team America. One of the students was interested in puppetry and puppetry films, so he gave me a power. And the reason I showed these is because they're PowerPoint. They were submitted in PowerPoint format. So I let them use the PowerPoint and the advantages of the PowerPoint to combine image, text. This young woman even inserted a video into her PowerPoint, so that they can put a number of different kinds of information together to talk about the thing that they're interested in. And it allows them to show me information in a way that isn't a standard essay, which frightens a lot of them. So it's just a way of giving them a little bit of relief from that pressure. But I expect the same level of research. I'm just asking them to deliver it in a different format, which sometimes makes all the difference. And then they gain a bit of confidence in their skills and their abilities. And I bring them through a few different things, but this is a year 3 project that I've had a lot of success with. Because in first and second year, they're gaining skills. In the third year, they're starting to move into independent research and independent thinking, and they have to do an independent thesis research project in the fourth year. So I use this as a way of getting them to move out into their own ideas, and I allow them, so it's a brief that has, allows them a few different kinds of media choices. So I ask them to think of an idea themselves. They have to have an independently conceived research question, and it has to be short but focused. And I try to get them around to the idea that as professionals in their fields, they'll be navigating different forms of expressions and media so that they can apply their knowledge outside of standard essay format. And I ask them to choose one of the following contexts. So, and I leave room for people for whom academic writing is a strength as well. So they can do a professional publication, they can do a Prezi presentation, which they like because it's all swishy and it moves. Magazine articles, PowerPoints with a voiceover if they want to do a presentation but they're too shy to talk or record their own voice or in front of people, you can record your voice in a PowerPoint, they love that. Academic journal articles, reflective essays. These guys, because of the media that they have available to them, can do video essays and things like that. So I offer them video essays, a documentary script, which I'm going to show you in a sec, and then a radio broadcast or a podcast in the form of a podcast. So I allow them to choose whatever kind of media they want to present the information in, because as far as I'm concerned, good research is good research. And if you can they have to give me a bibliography, but the research doesn't have to be footnoted in these presentations. But I just want them to get to grips with showing information in different media formats. And oftentimes this takes the form of what we call digital artifacts. A few of us at Dunleary use this. Expressions of research and analysis that are captured in formats other than a standard essay, but that live comfortably in online context, because a lot of the students have their own web pages, and it's nice if they can put their research up there with their animation work or their design work. So the following slide is from a documentary script in the form of a PowerPoint presentation made by a student who was researching the history of nitrate film. So she has this kind of media-rich environment where she has image. The red text indicates what kinds of images will be on the screen at any given moment, because it's a proposition for a documentary. The blue is what kind of sound will be playing, and then the black text is the voiceover. So she gets to combine all this, a proposition for all this different kinds. She gets to incorporate her different kinds of research into one very tidy media format. So it was a really nice presentation, actually. And I just want to show you a little film of how a student who did a video essay on narrative issues in Disney's Sleeping Beauty. And we had covered all kinds of stuff about narrative structure, about the 3-act structure, about the hero's journey, Disney film, Disney history. And he did this really tidy little 6-minute film about Disney and Sleeping Beauty. So I'll show you that now.
They say you should never judge a book by the cover, but people do anyway. The same can be said for movies. one of the first things people judge a film on is the title. So when a film takes the name of a character, there's a few typical audience expectations. Usually, this film is going to be about this character. They're the hero. It's their story, their journey. They are the character we're supposed to root for, to care about. Of course, there are exceptions. And right now I'll be talking about one of the biggest, most shameless examples. Walt Disney's Sleeping Beauty. Sleeping Beauty is a very old story with countless variations, but the Disney adaptation is based mostly on Charles Perrault's version. In Perrault's telling, 7 fairies bestow gifts on an infant princess, who was then cursed by a bitter old fairy to die by the prick of a spindle. The 7th good fairy reduces this to 100 years of sleep, after which the princess would be woken by an amiable young prince. The Disney version incorporates all of these characters. The princess, Sleeping Beauty herself, the good fairies, reduced from 7 to a more manageable 3, the evil fairy Maleficent, and the prince. While Disney films are known for making changes to their source material, Sleeping Beauty makes the greatest departure by shifting the focus entirely to the 3 good fairies. Simply put, Disney's Sleeping Beauty is not about Sleeping Beauty. These 3 ladies are the real star of the picture, and here's why. In the classic 3-act structure, there's the setup, the confrontation, and the resolution. And within this framework, we also have the inciting incident and the climax. Typically, a story involves the main character, the protagonist or the hero, traversing this series of obstacles and incidents. Even loosely applied, Disney's Sleeping Beauty neatly fits this structure. But who is our hero? In Perrault's story, the fairies' gifts for the princess are actually things like talent and looks and personality, and Perrault goes on a bit about how beautiful and engaging the princess is, which is all great leading role material. Disney's version too depicts a witty, intelligent young woman, but the problem is, the very nature of the plot makes Sleeping Beauty quite a passive character, story-wise. She has no journey, so she's not the hero. And even though he does some pretty heroic stuff, the prince isn't the hero either. He just doesn't meet all the requirements laid out by the 3-act structure. In fact, throughout the film, Sleeping Beauty and the prince are primarily involved in a mistaken identity subplot. The biggest characters on the poster are the subplot. Which brings us to the 3 good fairies, the smallest characters on the poster. And they're not even in this one. But again and again, it's these characters that fit the role of the hero. At the beginning, they're confronted with the inciting incident, they set out to resolve the situation, they're met with various incidents and obstacles along the way, and eventually they save the day. Forgetting the 3-act structure, there are other signs that the fairies are the main characters. They're the only characters with an arc. They start out as little more than bickering spinsters, and although it happens mostly off-screen, each of them becomes a mother to the princess.
Why, Merryweather, whatever's the matter, dear? After today, she'll be a princess, and we won't have any Briar Rose. Oh, Sherra! Now. We all knew this day had to come.
Ultimately, they confront Maleficent on her home turf, something unthinkable at the outset.
But we can't go there. We can, and we must.
Their hero's journey is clear to see. They're also the only characters with a backstory. We know next to nothing about the human characters, while it's clear the fairies have a long history with Maleficent.
Why, it's Maleficent. What does she want here?
Shh. Well, quite a glittering assemblage, King Stephen. Royalty, nobility, the gentry, and... how quaint. Even the rabble. I really felt quite distressed at not receiving an invitation.
You weren't wanted.
Not what?
It's not hard to imagine this is but one episode in a centuries-long rivalry between Maleficent and the fairies, with the humans unwittingly caught in the middle. Even on a technical storytelling level, it's obvious who the leads are. Take this scene, the pivotal moment where Sleeping Beauty awakes. Now, if the prince or the princess were the hero of the story, we might expect a reaction shot from the prince. Or Sleeping Beauty might embrace the prince, overjoyed at being reunited with her true love. But here's what happens. Only one reaction shot, and it goes to the fairies. Lastly, Sleeping Beauty appears on screen for 12 minutes and 50 seconds. Compare this with the fairies' 26 minutes and 16 seconds. The three good fairies are in Sleeping Beauty 48% more than Sleeping Beauty herself. At this point, you're probably thinking, why is this important? Why does any of this matter? Well, by retelling the Sleeping Beauty story from the fairies' point of view, the Disney artists have created a new story, akin to Tom Stoppard's Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead, or The Lion King 1.5. Several sources claim Disney's Sleeping Beauty is the most familiar version in the English-speaking world, but it's not the story of Sleeping Beauty at all. It's the Golden Girls with magic. The popular conception that Disney's film is the definitive version of the Sleeping Beauty myth, a cornerstone in world literature, is a little troublesome, and it's worth pointing out, that's all. I really hate the sound of my own voice, so I hope you got something out of this. Thanks for watching.
That was from a couple of years ago. The student who made that, I forgot to mention, was registered with the Access Service as dyslexic. So he was able to do sort of image research, visual analysis, cultural analysis, narrative structure. We had done script writing before in the second year. Script writing, he could talk about the difference between literature and film adaptation. There's a lot of research that is very smoothly incorporated into that little piece of work. And he probably actually worked harder on that than he would have if he had done it as a written essay. But because it was for a format that he loves and is familiar with, he did an amazing job. So I'll just leave you with that. Thank you very much for your time, and thanks for inviting me. Thank you.